welcome everyone to this Sustainability and Supply Chain HFS videocast. I'm Josh Matthews. I lead our research and consulting around sustainability, energy utilities, and supply chain. But way more importantly, I've got Janina Nakladal, who's the Global Director of Sustainability at Celonis, and I've got Sheri Hinish, who's the Global Sustainability Services and Alliances Leader at IBM. Amazing to have you two both with me today.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Josh. Two of my favorite people. I'm super excited to join.
Way too kind as always, Sheri. So I know we're gonna talk about two massive systems level problems here today. So sustainability is this huge systems level problem. Supply chains are massive systems within that problem, and sustainability and supply chain are becoming intertwined in pretty much every strategy, technology, process conversation that we're having now. So I kind of love to start thinking a little bit about sort of how this is playing out for you, for your clients at both Celonis and IBM. So maybe Janina, do you want to take that one to start with?
Yes, happy to get started. We can have a look at the pure numbers to show the connection already. The carbon footprint is usually the number that a lot of companies use to report on their sustainability performance, but also to set targets, to measure it, and to drive the actions. And about 70 to even 90% of a company's carbon footprint comes from the supply chain, which means it can be targeted towards the suppliers that they have, which then connects it even back to human rights issues or compliance. But it can be also related to transporting, logistics, the production, basically anything that you do in your supply chain. So even from a pure logical perspective, if you want to drive forward your sustainability performance and journey, you have to start with the supply chain. What then adds up to that and makes it a systems challenge as well and drives the complexity is that also all regulations at the moment are really targeted towards the supply chain. So you do see things around human rights issues, you do see reduction of carbon emissions that has to really go back into the supply chain. And then on top of that, at the third layer, is really all of the global challenges we see right now around supply chain disruption, inflation, geopolitical tensions that all affects the same system. And so if a company looks at what hits them at the moment, they have to look at their supply chain to be able to survive, but they also have to tackle their supply chain to be able to survive tomorrow as a business and tackle sustainability. So it is really a very natural and logical choice for us as a company, but also for our clients where we have the problem even more. And then they claim the same about their suppliers and customers. It's something we hear everywhere, really. And I hope, Sheri, that's true for IBM as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is, if you're in supply chain, operations, sourcing and procurement, this is certainly your moment. So here we go. When you think about the impact that a supply chain has end-to-end view on systems change, about 40% of the world actually works in a supply chain. And it is truly, the depth and breadth of how you operationalize sustainable performance. I think that absolutely happens in a supply chain. It's how we make it real. What I'm seeing is it's not just about carbon emissions. And oftentimes, some of the clients that we speak to can have this carbon tunnel vision where they just focus on decarbonization, but it's so much more than that. It's thinking about biodiversity, thinking about ocean health, thinking about concepts around human rights imperatives, making sure you don't have child or forced labor, making sure you have a fair living wage. And all of these things really drive two business imperatives, as previously mentioned. Sustainability isn't someone else's problem, and it's going to take a lot of collaboration with your ecosystem for real impactful change. And this shows up in climate and also the social inequities that we see right now. These are root causes that are driving a lot of the systemic rethinking of old business paradigms, operating models, and integrated business process.
Yeah, it's not becoming any less important at all, is it? I swear every conversation of the three of us seem to have, and pretty much any conversation that touches on either of these two subjects, it's the theme of visibility. And I know as soon as I say the word visibility, a lot of people out there are going to groan. I can throw in transparency. There's another groan as well. But really, the kind of the useful definition of visibility stands out as key to so many problems and solutions. And obviously, another theme that weaves through that is the data piece as well. Not just kind of where you put it and what you do with it, but having the right visibility and the right processes so you can use it. So you can use it when and how that you need. So love to talk a bit more about this, but maybe sort of before going on to the importance of visibility, transparency, things like that, would love for you two to provide a bit more context that I think everyone needs about what we really mean by visibility and transparency.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in here. And Josh, I know transparency is a huge word that we have unpacked several times. There's a difference. And I like to think of it as visible means you can see it. Maybe you have insights into data and like very narrow or specific impacts, but it often lacks context. I worked in solution strategy early on in control towers many years back, and the context was, so what? I can see it now. What do I do? What's the action? What's the next best step? And this is where I think transparency really shines, and it's differentiated from visibility. Transparency means it can be understood by anyone that can see it. So you have the right context, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a million data points. It means I have the right communication and the right accountability, making it easy to see what that next action is in decision orchestration and how it's impacted within a system that stakeholder participates in. With transparency, you can really do anything. It's not just one outcome that's siloed. You really understand negative and reinforcing loops. You understand trade-offs. You understand how it's tied to business resilience. And I think there's a lot of things that come with that. It takes open architecture. It takes collaborating together. And just like sustainability, transparency, it's a team sport. And sometimes I think it can feel a little bit like co-opetition. So do you share details around your sourcing and network strategy with your competitors, for example? The thing that comes up, I think, the most in my client conversations right now is, when people say they want transparency, there's a lot of folks asking for it. In a recent CEO study, one of the largest conducted in industry, Institute for Business Value, which is IBM's research arm, boards stood out wanting 5 times more transparency than last year. And I think that people confuse transparency sometimes with this massive amounts of data needed. I'll give you an example how it shows up specifically in a sustainable supply chain. Let's say that you want transparency at the shelf, and a consumer scans a QR code, and you return the emissions reduction in a metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. How many people really know what that means? Not many. But if you say, look, if you choose this product, maybe you save 40 trees from being cut down. They get it. They'd make a different decision. So I think that that's the difference for me. It's having the right context to make a different decision. And this is where data and technology really helps human beings be better versions of themselves.
And you mentioned a super important point, Sheri, which I think a lot of people really misunderstand, or we often hear that from clients, being transparency is the same as 100% visibility, a million data points, and really having that completely glass view on everything that works in your business. And that is something that is holding us back, especially in sustainability at the moment, because people think they can only have that context to make better decisions if they also have 100% transparency, which is counterproductive, to be honest, because you will most likely never have the 100% because that's what your business is moving too fast, or someone is just not sharing it. And you also might not need it. There's like this nice kind of like parallelism for parents. Of course, if you have a child, you want to know 100% what your child does. And that would be like your whole visibility. And yes, you would be sleeping better at night. Do you know 100% what your child does? Probably not, probably never. But if you only have already 10% of visibility of what your child does, if they go out at night or so, you would already be sleeping better than at a 0%. And I think that same kind of attitude is what's sometimes needed. And it comes back to, is that context sufficient to make a better decision? And is it optimal? For me, I aim to go away from perfect to optimal for like really making that decision. And that comes already with some data. And we see that especially when we think about business processes and the way that we, over the last years with technology created more visibility into them. And now with technology, we're adding exactly that transparency about the root causes, the context information. We're connecting systems. We're understanding more and more what's going on. And we're actually much more transparent than we have been years ago. And now we're at the stage where we can really make those better decisions instead of waiting until we have even more transparency.
Absolutely. And I'd love, Josh, if it's all right, to bring this to life with a real-time example.
Absolutely.
So for some of our supply chain nerds out there, let's talk about BOM level data or scalable LCAs and how they're often divorced from enterprise sustainability or ESG reporting. So what if, just in the spirit of having a transparent label, for example, like this jacket I'm wearing, if a consumer could scan and get BOM level LCA data around date of manufacturing, energy source, is it 100% coal? Is it renewable energy? Quality, how many times can this be worn? Is it 20? Is it 40? What's the total distance that this garment has traveled in a supply chain? What's the number of countries it's visited? What are the total number of materials used? Maybe it's 2, maybe it's 10. And this is where I think, some of the human rights and social imperatives are really coming to life and are really important to consumers and trading partners. What's your textile workers pay? What's the percentage of fair living wage? So fair living wage isn't just living wage, but above some of those collective bargaining agreements, above, can you meet extraordinary expenses? Do you have access to healthcare and so on? These are the types of things that I think would really shift real system change, because consumers can often forget they're the demand signal and we want to get closer to what they want. So that's the type of change I think that I'm after, at least in the work that I lead at IBM and Celonis.
It's hyper important context. With everything in sustainability about getting, and for visibility, transparency, whatever it might be, having the kind of right context for that, for the right person, the right organization at the right time for them, whatever that might be. Because I'm never worried, and this is someone almost comes out in spades talking to Celonis and IBM. I'm never worried that we don't have the technology or the people or the organizations out there to sort of try and fix the mess that we've gotten ourselves into. And everyone watching this knows that mess is becoming all the more obvious over the last few months, if it wasn't already. But so back to the sustainability and supply chain side of things. I mean, it seems like the overriding priority around everything that we've talked about needs to be this collaboration piece. I know there's been reasonably long-standing partnership between Celonis and IBM. You obviously partner with others, and I'd love to know a bit about, to close this out, kind of what you're doing between the two of you with other partners to really use the positions and the influence that you have within your ecosystems, within those systems, when it comes to influencing and setting the bar for supply chain and sustainability more broadly.
I mean, in the end, partnerships and collaboration are so important to share knowledge and to get the right pieces together. It's a bit like a puzzle. It can't work with just one piece. And also, no company alone can solve this systemic challenge. It's just too big, and you need too many skills, knowledge pieces, people, and force, and also different learnings. Like, we're learning in every project, and by having IBM as a partner, we're learning even more, and we can build even greater tools together. And then there's always a different viewpoint, and we have to be open to learning from each other and use the various experiences. And I think the beauty by combining a technology platform like the Celonis execution management system with a partner that has just such a broad and also deep expertise in a lot of industries, but also across clients and really going deep in the projects. That is really the beauty of being able to create more targeted solutions and to find out more. And then, I mean, specifically when Sheri and I work together on sustainability pieces, there's also research involved. There's, there is awareness creation involved about being able to talk about it, involve other people, running events together, being on joint customer projects, and by that really getting the word out, and maybe even bringing some hope and power out there as well. Like that's what I personally also love about that collaboration of saying like there's a very positive understanding of the potential. We're seeing it as a challenge, but also as an opportunity, not necessarily as a pure threat. And that pushes really things forward that can move mountains for every team that is involved in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to touch on one thing too, is the importance of aligning values between companies. I think that certainly that's something that matters to me, like how I show up at work. I don't want to leave my values at the door. And I'm very grateful to be able to really lean in and lead with those values. I think oftentimes there's this business case for change, but there's a moral case for change too. And Josh, I know that's something that you're super passionate about as well. Research was mentioned. Again, IBM and Celonis did a joint research white paper with the Institute for Business Value. And I think, if folks wanted to see the business case for change, it certainly exists too. And more than half of the CSCOs surveyed said that digital supply chain transformation will be the most significant area of competitive advantage in the next 3 years. It's no surprise here. We know what's going on in the world. 80% of CSCOs said demand volatility is a top challenge. You also have the need for sustainability, so competitive pressure, regulatory pressure. Again, pulling in the CEO study, I always like to have these data points because when you look at the representative sample size and the roles of those folks that are guiding, steering, making decisions, aligning the corporate agenda, the sustainability agenda with investment in technology, it's overwhelmingly clear that you have to align your digital and modernization agenda with your sustainability agenda if you want to make it real. Otherwise, it won't work. Specifically with Celonis, I always like to start with the use case. And I think that there are several that are front of mind when you think about the power of digital and sustainable supply chain, sustainable spend and procurement. So having that end-to-end process view with RPA, looking at your strategy, your total addressable market, but more importantly, what's that roadmap to an ideal state? And I think that road mapping is critical. A lot of folks have their net zero journey, they have their targets, they've adopted SBTI, but it's like, how do you triple click that? How do you line it up with MVPs in a way where you're looking across, 4 to 10 years to not only transform your own company, but then offer that as a service model, catalog of services to your customers, bringing folks with you. I think there are also other benefits. I mean, just classic optimization, reducing, monetizing waste streams, mitigating emissions, especially in manufacturing and execution, but then also thinking about how do you become future fit when you're in an inflationary market. So I think this is another offering that IBM and Celonis have partnered in to really double click on the financial, digital, and sustainable supply chain plus. So super excited.
And I would love to add one thing, Sheri. It's like it's coming from the study you've mentioned with the chief supply chain officers, and there was one number in it that sometimes doesn't let me sleep at night, which is the 51% of them that are willing to sacrifice profit for sustainability. Where I'm really where I was really surprised. First of all, obviously it's great that they would do it, but I feel like it wouldn't be necessary if they're also able to achieve the value coming from sustainability initiatives. And what I love about the collaboration and the use cases that we develop together is that we approach them with a business mindset as well, saying there has to be a tangible value coming from it. And we have to be able to use technology to make any trade-offs visible, and to also capture that what we call green line value, which means for the use case you described in sustainable procurement, capturing really that percentage of procurement spend that is rated by suppliers, for example, and be able to link that back to a company rating, or to be able to really calculate emissions and then put a value on it as well, which you would save by if you had to offset them or so. And by that, really combining the different business KPIs and objectives you have overall, and putting a value tag on it, because I want that, that number of 51% is actually not even existent, because people realize that there is value coming from their sustainability initiatives, which also drives their profit in the end.
Absolutely. And, value is a big word too. I mean, we talked about the big word transparency, but when you say value, it's, okay. So I'm going to go back to Lean Six Sigma training. And there was a quote that really stuck with me. I mean, we talk a lot about optimization techniques, but sometimes you have to be completely disruptive and rethink systems for real change. And it's the continuous improvement of the candle did not result in the invention of the light bulb. So even when we're in these client discussions, I think one thing, I mean, we're Celonis and IBM, especially our organizations. I mean, look at who's leading this motion for both of these companies. It's different. It's really different. We're leading differently. We're leading with values. And I think we do challenge customers to be disruptive and say, what's the transformation? Like, how are you embedding circularity? How are you thinking about new business models, new streams of revenue? So it's not just the optimization lens for proven business value. It's also pushing folks to not operate from a 1984 playbook anymore. And we are literally seeing the results of that real time. It's going to take us, less Gates, more Greta, to realize this vision and build a new world that we can be proud of, a new world that's responsible and equitable, and dare I say, circular.
Couldn't agree.
It's such an important point to finish on. I mean, the thing that stands out to me about that 51% stat, that means that 49% aren't willing to sacrifice profit for sustainability, and that's still looking at it with that kind of or mindset, with that trade-off mindset. I'd love for anyone watching this to take away to just not to be unashamed in making the moral case just as much, if not way more than the business case. The two go hand in hand, but that's what it's the moral case that will really change things at the level, at that systems level that we needed to, and everything else is woven in and comes after. But we could talk for hours and hours and hours on this, so much more, but we'll have to save that for the next one. Thank you so much, Sheri. Thank you so much, Janina, for joining me. I think there's an open invitation out there for anyone watching to get in touch on any and all angles. Would love to discuss absolutely everything. But for now, take care, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.